Hello, welcome to today's video. So today we're going to look at the z-axis of the Creality CR-10 and some of the issues it has. So first off, the new CR-10 models, basically the new productions, when they ship them they keep the zero out of the coupler so as not to get damaged during transport. So I've seen a lot of people who are unsure on what to do with them. So basically it would look something like this. Well, it's quite simple. All you have to do is slowly maneuver it in, and once it's in you have to pull it just a millimeter up and then tighten the grab screw just to hold it in place. There's two grab screws, there's one, then if you rotate a little you'll see another one down here, so you tighten both and that's about it. If you cannot bring it down, there's a bearing up where the zeroid is held. We're gonna see in a few minutes, so stay tuned and we'll see what to do in that case. So the second part of this video will be how to adjust the Z rod so it is straight, basically perpendicular bottom and top. So first thing we're gonna do is remove the flexible coupler completely, and to do that I'm gonna unscrew both top and bottom screws. So I'm gonna hold the Z-rod and pull upwards. Now I'm gonna remove the coupler, set it aside and let it come back down again. So one thing that I want to see is basically, let me just move it a little. As you can see, the Z-rod sits nicely on top of the motor shaft and it's pretty straight, let's say. So that won't be the case when you first set the machine up. It'll probably be either that way or something like that. So let's see how we can fix it. Now I've gone ahead and removed these plastic trims that sit under the stepper motor, and that's because they don't go all the way in, they just sit something like half a centimeter under the stepper motor, so it tends to allow the stepper to be higher on the, basically closer to the camera. It sits on it and it doesn't sit all the way to the aluminum extrusion. So in order to remove that, you can just pry them. For instance, if you see this one, if I just, let me just focus that. Yeah, if I just put something in the edge and then pull it up, you can just pull it out that way and get rid of it. So now, before I start doing anything else, I want to check one more thing, and in order to do that I'm gonna lift the Z-axis up a bit, find something to place under the X-axis extrusion, just so that there's a gap here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take a 2.5mm hex screwdriver and I'm gonna undo these two screws. Those are the screws holding the Z stepper in place. So I'm gonna place it back again, but this time, okay, let's just, if the Z rod comes down just like mine did, all you have to do is turn it counterclockwise so that it goes up. So I might have to put something there so it doesn't come back down again. I'm gonna use the trim that I removed, just place it there so it holds it in place. So now I'm gonna put the stepper back in place, but before I tighten the stepper I'm gonna loosen gonna loosen the 4 screws here. You're gonna need a 3mm hex for this. So I'll loosen all 4. Now that they're loose, I can remove the T-bracket from there. The reason I'm gonna remove this is because it might bother the stepper sitting nicely on the extrusion. We're gonna put it back in a bit. So I'm gonna push it inwards, and also I'm gonna push down from the back. Okay, so another direction that I want to push is towards the center of the printer. So it's whoop, in, down, and just like that. So now I can take my 2.5mm screwdriver again, and I can screw them. You have to make sure though, with these T-nut or hammer nut screws, nuts, that they catch nicely. So in my case now, one of them didn't catch. You can always see from the top, they have to spin basically. So I'm gonna undo it again, and I'm gonna undo it quite a bit this time. Okay, it's twisting a little, but not all the way. Let me see if I can somehow get it in shot. It's gonna be a bit difficult. You can barely see them. So what has to happen is they have to rotate, and sometimes they're a bit stubborn and they don't want to rotate. If you have a stubborn one, what you can do is just get a straight screwdriver, something like this. Sorry for the picture, but I cannot focus it anymore, that's on maximum. So you can just rotate it with this screwdriver. Yeah, doesn't want to go. Yeah, let's try that again. Yeah, there's a blooper for you. Yeah, there. Now it's sitting nicely. So if you see the left one, I know it's not perfect. Let me get some light. Might help that way. So if you can see, the left one is nicely turned in and it's straight, but the right one is hanging a bit from the top. That's because it didn't turn nicely. So I'm just gonna do the same thing for that as well. Yeah, that's it. So now that I know the Z stepper is where I want it to be, I'm gonna put this back, the T bracket. So with the T bracket, what I have to make sure is you bring this horizontal and then this vertical. Once it's placed there, you want to make sure that the stepper is not touching the T bracket. You have quite a move. There's almost 2 millimeters of play. So just bring it all the way down, hold it in place, and now screw it in. I'm having some trouble with the T-nuts today. Okay, we're done with the T bracket as well. So our next step is we want to move the carriage axis extrusion all the way up, and in order to do that, just remove this plastic piece I put there. So I'm just going to pull from here and move it up. In some cases where the bearing is binding onto the zeroed, like we discussed previously, if you couldn't move the zeroed up, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to come up here. See these two? So those are using a 2mm hex screwdriver. We're going to undo these two screws. It's one, and that's two. So now when I pull it up, it should, and this thing can remove that, put it aside, and here is the bearing. So the bearing should be moving freely, but in some cases it doesn't. That's not a big deal. As long as it rotates, you're fine. So if yours doesn't move freely and you need to move it up, for instance, when you get it, sometimes it might look something like this, and you can't really do anything. Then you just move it up and you try to pull the bearing out. You can put some grease somehow to help it. At some point it will come. So I'm gonna remove the bearing as well. Now I'm gonna move the x-axis all the way up. Let it touch up there. I'm gonna let the zeroed come all the way down. This might take a while. If yours is not coming down freely, you can just rotate it clockwise and it will go down. So again, I want it to go down and sit on top of the stepper shaft. A small trick that you can do is you can get some cable ties. Mine are a bit short, so I'm going to use two to extend them. And you can put them through here. Okay. So this will hold it up so that I don't have to think too much about it and play with it a lot. So what I want to do now is, using a 2.5mm hex screwdriver, undo lightly these two screws, and this will allow me to move this left and right. So now that I can center the zeroed on the shaft as best as I can, and then when I come up, I want to center the zeroed so as it's in the middle of the hole. Let me focus there. And so the gap on the left and on the right should be equal. Don't look for back and front, just look left and right. That's what's important now. So once I get that gap equal on both sides, I can tighten this again. And that's good. So the next step now is to place the coupler in place. So I'm gonna rotate the zeroed to move it up, and I'm gonna place, making sure that the indented part of the shaft is facing me and the grab screw is against it. I'm gonna put it in. So what I want to make sure though is, before I tighten it, I want to move it up just a millimeter maybe, so that the coupler is not touching the body of the stepper motor. See, there's a very small gap down there. So I'm going to tighten from both sides. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to release the zero, then see. Yeah, you see? Went straight in. It's very good. So my next test would be place the bearing up top again. That's that. I'm going to get the retaining clip in, and I'm going to screw the two screws holding it in place as well. A neat trick with this is, because this is plastic and the threads could wear easily, when you put the screw in, don't just screw it straight away. You turn counterclockwise until you feel the screw going in just a bit. Yeah, there it is. That means that it just fell into the old grooves now. If I screw it now, you see how easy it goes? And that makes sure that I won't rethread the plastic. And if I rethread it a few times, then I won't be able to screw it anymore because the threads will be damaged. So I'll do the same with this as well. I'll go counterclockwise. Whoop, you see, went in. Now screw it in easily. And that's it. So now I'm going to see how well of a job I did. And to do that, I'm going to get a pair of cutters. And I'm going to cut the cable tie holding the X carriage up. But before I do that, I forgot one small detail. No, that's correct actually. So now that I've cut the cable ties, I'm holding the X carriage by hand. There it is. And I'm gonna allow it to come down by itself. If it goes down by itself, as it's doing in my case, you see, that means that the zero is pretty straight. Let's try it again. I'm gonna move it all the way up. Allow the zero to go in its place. So again, I'm only holding it from here. I let go, and you see how nice it went down? If you get that, it means you did a good job with the placement of the top and bottom alignment. So that's one part of it. Another small issue there is with this system. By the way, now you can tighten these top screws so that we finish with this, but before you do that, I want you to pull the x-axis up just a millimeter. You can either do it from here or here, and the reason for that is now that it's sitting, the motor shaft touches the zeroed, and you don't really want that to happen because you want just a little bit of amount of play there in case your zeroed is bent, so that the flexible coupling can do its job. When the rod and the shaft are touching, then the flexible coupler can't really flex, and so you're beating its purpose. So I'm gonna move it up just a millimeter and then tighten the grab screws. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. So let's look at another issue that the CR-10 has. So if you notice, the stepper motor is to the right of the rod. Now when you have it properly aligned left to right, this shouldn't be an issue, and it helps the gantry not to fall with the gravity's force. If you want to have it perfectly straight and you don't want to have this difference, then you can go on Thingiverse. There are some plastic spacers that you can print. There's a millimeter, 1.5, and so on, and you can place it in between the aluminum extrusion and the plastic mount of the stepper motor. If you place it right in between, you have to see not all motors are the same. You should get it straight. And the reason not all are the same is because most of the time these machines are not really 100% squared, so you might have a difference. If you get a measuring tool and measure the straightness of both of the vertical extrusions, you'll see that they're not 100% squared up. So now another issue that there is the fact that there is a gap on the side where the extruder is, and you can see if you hold, for instance, let me just turn it around. So if I hold it from this side, you see this gap? So I have this gap, and actually my wheels on this side are properly adjusted, and logically I shouldn't have this issue. And the reason for this is because the calibration is only on the right side. You have the eccentric nut here, but you don't have one on the left side. And more often than not, if you look at the left side, you'll notice that at least one of the wheels are, for instance, in my case, the bottom wheel is quite tight, the top one is pretty free, not really touching, and the in one is also tight. So what you have to do in order to fix this is, there's two ways. The best way would be to get an eccentric nut and put it in here, just like you have on the right side, so that you have the same on the left side, and then you can adjust it. That would be the ideal remedy. But if you don't have an eccentric nut and you don't want to order one and wait for it, there's another. So I just realized after finishing the video that the camera's memory ran out, so I'm gonna have to do this part again. Yay! So I'm gonna start fixing the issue that I showed you previously. So first thing I'm gonna do is, using a 3mm hex drive, I'm gonna undo the top and bottom screws. So now that they're loose, I'm gonna rotate the flexible coupling so I can move the axis upwards. I'm gonna get some wooden blocks, place them on the right side under the x-axis extrusion, and let the axis go down and touch. So now that it's touching, I'm gonna rotate a bit more, and now you'll see that this wheel is quite free. So what I'm gonna do now is, I'm gonna tighten it, but at the same time I'm gonna push the wheel inwards. Now I'm gonna tighten it. So now if you see, it's a bit free, but this will go away once we adjust everything. So I'm gonna move the axis up again, and this time I'm gonna get my wooden blocks and bring them on the left side of the printer, move it back down. Once it's down, I'm gonna push a bit on the right side, so I make sure it's nice and down. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna repeat the tightening process on the bottom screw. Once again, I'm gonna hold the nut, push the wheel inwards, and tighten it as best I can. So, if all went well, let's remove the blocks, move it back here. Yeah, as you can see, there's a very little amount of play, but that's normal because the whole thing is only being held up by the zero, which is on one side. But as you can see, that's minimal compared to what it was before. Okay, so that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed and you can do the same on yours and be successful. If you have any ideas or any requests or anything you want to let me know, comment below and I'll make my best to answer. And if you like this video, like it, and if you'd like to see more of the same, subscribe so you can get notified when I make a new one. Thanks, have a good day, bye.